Then my grandma, she starts crying. She's like, all I know is I want my babies, all of them, to make it to heaven. Then my uncle gets up. It was just... One Thanksgiving, I had just gotten back from college. I was coming to a new understanding of what God and spirituality meant. It was so different than how I was raised to believe. Y'all, this is Thanksgiving, so we're sitting around a dinner table. Somebody says something, and I'm like biting my tongue, and finally I just say, Grandma, I don't believe that. Then my grandma, she starts crying. She's like, all I know is I want my babies, all of them, to make it to heaven. Then my uncle gets up. It was just, I don't remember the details of it, but I remember the feeling of, dang, I should have been quiet. The kerfuffle of speaking out about your feelings could cause that kind of, especially y'all on Thanksgiving. I imagine that's probably exactly why they were raised to just be quiet and you deal with it. The agitation that comes might not be worth it. The gap that we see in the generations is how we perceive self-care and what it means to speak up. Back in the day, children were to be seen, not heard. And that manifested itself in terms of how you spoke about your needs. If you were going through bullying or any kind of what we would consider trauma, you were expected to suck it up and deal with it. I read it in a play, Vagina Monologues by Eve Ensler. The play is based on a compilation of interviews. And one of the monologues talks about this woman being in a relationship and the guy just doesn't talk about his feelings. He was just the average guy, just didn't talk about feelings. When I shared with my mom about that, she said, yeah, that sounds about right. It's not uncommon for her generation to be in a relationship with somebody and they just not talk about feelings. Like that's how it was back in the day. No matter if you were going through a rough patch or things were difficult at work, you just didn't talk about it, which is very different than our generation. We're encouraged to speak up and speak out. We're expected to be in conversation. That's so different than how it was back in the day. I was working on this essay contest. It was the opportunity for a scholarship, and y'all, I thought I was so deep. I've discovered something in the dictionary. It was called the generational gap. And y'all, listen, I was doing my thing. I was probably like 16 or 17. I was basically saying how with every generation passing away and then a new one emerging, there's the resistance before the younger generation takes over. I'm thinking about this because I had a really good conversation with my mom about how my generation, millennials, will work for a few months and quit versus my grandfather. He worked for Campbell Soup for years, actually decades. Then he retired and got the gold watch, and then he passed away not long after. My mom and her generation, they'll stick with that job and they'll find another job and stick with that job until it makes sense and then they'll ride it out. Versus our generation will try it for a little bit and then we gone. We talked about how our generation, we have a different understanding of self-care. We got a different understanding of what it means to commit. I understand how it would appear to be selfish, but I think there's something really powerful about committing to one sense of happiness, one sense of joy. There's an affirmation that says, joy is mine through all seasons of my life. What I love about it is we are claiming possession of it. Now we know joy is one of those things. It's like, how do you claim possession of it? Just like oxygen, how do you possess oxygen? One way that we do it is when we breathe, we absolutely possess it, even if it's momentarily. And that joy, we can experience that and breathe that in, and it can be ours if we desire, and then we release it to experience a new thing. What I think is powerful about the generational gaps that we have seen over our time is that we actually have an opportunity to learn from each other. And so my mom talked about what it meant to see her coworkers come in for a job, they'll work a little bit and they'll roll out. I imagine what it teaches her is commitment to an organization versus commitment to oneself and one's dreams, which is very different than how my mom was raised. Often there's a spotlight on all the differences that we have, but I think that's really something beautiful about us learning from each other. We can pass that knowledge to another generation and then it just expands and explodes. All right, y'all, it's a pleasure. I'll see you on the other side. Peace.